presentation. And we just heard that notice that the recording is in progress. And an accessible video will be available for viewing at the IT Professionals Conference website in the coming weeks. I'll begin briefly by introducing Jeffrey Schockler. His presentation will follow, and then we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. I'll be monitoring and sharing your questions during the Q&A session, and you'll please put your questions in either the Zoom chat or the WebEx chat. Now I'd like to introduce Jeffrey Schockler, who is the Director for Advising Technology and Assessment in the Office of Undergraduate Advising, and he served in this role since November of 2012. Previously, he worked for 15 years in the College of Letters and Science Honors Program 9 as its Associate Director. His educational background is in anthropology, archaeology, and geoscience from Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas, and the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And now I'll turn it over to you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Ellen. I really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for coming this afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. We'll get the slides fired up. And hit share. Hopefully you can see my title slide. Ellen or Mandy, let me know if that is not the case.
You're all good.
Excellent, thank you. Well, again, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with everyone today. And really what I want to do is share a little bit of my story with you. And by doing that, I'm hoping that you'll come away with some ideas about how you might be able to frankly, just affect positive change at this institution from your own position and role, whether you're within central IT, within DoIT, or you're in distributed IT, outside of DoIT in a school, college, or division. We're all in a position actually to affect positive change and in the technology space to do so in really interesting and really impactful ways. My own work at the university, and my start in university administration was 23 years ago now in 1998. Really the past 23 years, my work is laying at the intersection of the academic domain and IT, information technology. And that's a really fun place to be actually, with one foot in each. In some ways, I'll often say that I speak both languages. I can talk academic, I can talk IT, and I can translate between those two communities and for each of those communities to help improve understanding of challenges, needs, and how we might go about solving those kinds of things. The story that I'm going to share with you is going to begin really in the honors program, the LNS honors program. So that's really at the unit level, although it's an interesting unit because it does serve an entire division, essentially the College of Letters and Science, which is itself a very large, very complex organization. So it was in the honors program where I learned how to affect change at multiple scales, not only from the unit level, but kind of in a large, complex organization. And then I'll kind of move on to talking a little bit about some of the things that I've learned while in the Office of Undergraduate Advising, where I've been for the past 9 years, which was really formed to provide central coordination and support of a completely decentralized activity, which is academic advising at this institution. So it was very unique when it was founded, and in some ways it's still unique, which is unfortunate. I think it's a reproducible model in other domains. But again, it's intended not to provide control, but central coordination and support of this activity that takes place at the school college division and then even at the unit level. So what I want to do is just share some of the learning that I've taken away from kind of working on the periphery. I learned that Mandy is also an archaeologist and has an archaeological background. We have a concept in archaeology called the core and periphery model. So the core you can think of as DoIT, right? It's the urban center where all the pyramids are and all the activity takes place and the rituals and all that good stuff. And then the periphery is kind of the hinterlands, the agricultural area. But the cool thing is that the core and the hinterland depend on each other. They need each other to survive and to perform their functions. And I think that's very true from my experience at the university, that distributed IT and central IT DoIT do need each other. And when we work together, we can actually do really, really remarkable things. And that's kind of really what I hope to share with you in our time. So in my 20 plus years of working in the space of advising technology, and again, at this intersection of the academic and the technical. I've had the pleasure and the opportunity really to advance some really big things at the institution. Initially, kind of in a very operational mode in the honors program, solving immediate unit needs. But those needs turned out to be, or those solutions turned out to be effective in other parts of the College of Letters and Science. So suddenly they became division level solutions that people were interested in buying into. And then folks in other divisions got wind of it and said, hey, we have that same need. We have that same pain point. Could we buy into what you're doing? And then things keep snowballing and kind of rolling into where I had the opportunity to really get some ideas out there and affect some change at the enterprise level, where everyone at the institution actually has potentially been impacted by or utilized a solution that I had a big hand in affecting. And I'm not saying that to toot my own horn. I'm saying it to let you know and to give you the confidence that your idea, an idea you have to solve a problem or a pain point for somebody in your unit, the division, the entire institution, can actually change the course of this giant battleship called the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I've been able to do this a few times in my career here, and it's a very exciting, very powerful feeling to know that your idea as an individual can actually impact tens of thousands of people over decades of time. And it's possible. I've done it. You can do it too if you haven't already done it or in the process of doing it yourself. So my start back in 1998, but really kind of my first big impact in the honors program and subsequently in the College of Letters and Science space was what I call the Proto Advisor Notes System. So I'm going to de-acronym for you. ANS is the Advisor Notes System, which you may have heard of at the institution. And the Proto Advisor Notes System was essentially a database that I built on FileMaker Pro, is the platform that I used, a relational database. And boy, at the time it was probably FileMaker Pro 6 or something like that. It's up to 16 or 17. But our unit had a problem. We didn't have a way to really effectively and efficiently document the outcomes of our advising contacts with our students. We had paper files pretty much in that day, and sometimes some spreadsheets, that were on local area networks at the time. But we didn't really have an effective way to share information. So this was fundamentally a communication problem. How can our advisors share information of the interactions they're having with our students so that they can be in the know when they're preparing to meet with that student at a later date? That solution also needed to be able to handle multiple users in it at the same time. Spreadsheets are not good for this, right? So my brain was percolating on these issues. We also would value having the ability to get assessment data out of this thing and really to enhance our communication to better support our students. So what was that? That was the awareness of the problem, and it was multiple problems actually. And because I had experience developing relational databases to manage large data sets, as an archaeologist, we have large data sets. I had the skill and I said, hey, I think I might have a solution. FileMaker Pro can actually handle multiple people in it at the same time in the same database. What if I try and build an advisor note system to allow our team of advisors to document, manage, go back to, and reference the set of the advising history, essentially, of the students that we were working with. My director at the time was very high on that idea and said, go for it. And I developed that and we implemented it in 2003. It worked great. It was mainly internal. It was mainly for our unit, but it was very effective and our advisors absolutely loved it. It helped them be more effective in their work with our students. Similarly, the SOAR advising module, which is known as SAM, I developed the Proto-SAM to solve a need in the honors program. We had no really good way of managing our SOAR processes, documenting our outcomes from SOAR, and again, in a way that could support simultaneous users in it all at the same time. So I developed another database called SAM, SOAR Advising Module, that met our honors program SOAR needs for quite a while. Well, what happens when you developed an effective tool like this? People get wind of it. So I started getting inquiries from friends and colleagues in other units across LNS, but also in other divisions. Some of you may know Sarah Fodaker, who was in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. Before she left here, she was the Associate Dean for Student Services over there, or Academic Affairs, actually. And she got wind of this and said, hey, our unit has that same need. Could this thing accommodate including us in it? I was like, yeah, I think it could. I expanded it, I enhanced it, and Sarah's unit started using it. So you can see where this is going, right? Sure enough, by 2009, there were enough people that were aware of this, and this pain point existed across the entire institution, every advising unit. We had very poor communication. It was time to build an advisor note system, or buy if we could. At the time, there were no products that we could buy and implement, so we had to build it ourselves back in that day. And the advisor note system, ANS, still exists today. It's 11 years old, has nearly 1 million records in it, but it's not my system. In 2009, we got a task force together from folks all over the institution, did business analysis, got some project management, spun up a project, got MIU funding, central funding to build an institutional advisor note system. And that is still going, and it's still very effective today. So that was my first experience of having an idea that others found useful, and that our unit certainly found useful. It solved our problem, that ultimately ended up being an enterprise system that serves everybody and potentially every student at the campus today. And that is a reproducible thing. All of us from our positions at the institution, whether you're in a formal titular leadership position or not, you can have a transformative idea. And if you share it with others and work hard to make it happen, you can make it happen here. So we have in the kind of mid 2010, 2011 range, the enterprise scale advisor note system and SOAR advising modules were developed and built and deployed. Both are still going today. SOAR starts next week, and we are using the SOAR advising module that was developed from those initial ideas back in the early 2000s. Another problem, and I'm going to show you what an advising problem looks like. So I'm going to switch to another slide. So just take a look at this. Don't worry too much about what each of those particular screenshots is, but at a glance, what you're seeing are the user interfaces of all of the possible systems that an academic advisor at this institution might need to use in their work with the student today. This isn't from 10 or 20 years ago. This is the array of tools an advisor might need to use right now. Now, about 10 years ago, after the Office of Undergraduate Advising was formed, I was actually hired into the unit really to solve this problem. The situation was worse 10 years ago. We actually had more systems, and we didn't have anything that integrated any of them. So we realized we had a problem and we needed to solve it, which was we needed to reduce the complexity of the way in which advisors got information that they needed to work with students. It was too much. Way back in the day, you actually had different logins, before single sign-on, before NetID, you had different logins and passwords that you had to manage to get into each of these things. Like, single sign-on and MyUW at least helped solve that particular problem. But what we developed as a way to, the idea I had was to develop a user interface that would mask this complexity and essentially provide advisors with a, what amounts to kind of the heads-up display in a fighter jet. All the important or useful information that an advisor or someone else working with students might need if they're going to work with a student, have it right there in an easy-to-use, intuitive user interface. The complexity, all of the systems, the source systems for that data were still there, and they are still there today. But this user interface was built with tons of user input, with UI, UX expertise. We'll get to that in a little while too. So it made it, you didn't need training to use it. You could intuitively use it, and it gave you access, direct access to the information you need to work with student, or you could get to it from there. So it was a get or get to kind of interface. That took away about 3 or 4 systems, major systems that advisors were having to mess with all the time during their workday. We learned that on average, 10 years ago, an advisor had to touch 6 or 7 different systems in a single interaction with a single student. And think about doing that 6, 7, 8 times a day. So the Advising Gateway was a huge success, really simplifies and streamlines access to student information for folks, masks the complexity that's still there under the hood. But it's a solution that required a ton of collaboration in order to pull off. So working on the periphery, right? Working out in distributed IT, I might have an idea, but I can't make that idea happen. I have to work really hard to be able to achieve a goal, to solve a problem. And it's nigh on impossible to do it from just being over here out on the periphery in distributed IT. You have to work really closely with folks at central IT and do it, with folks in the registrar's office, sometimes admissions, other units to be able to pull something off like this. So more recently, and this was new for me back in 2017, we actually needed to solve some other problems. We had to replace the aging legacy scheduling system that we had called Scheduling Assistant. Some of you may be familiar with that. It was home built, it's 20 years old, had been rebuilt 3 times on an old code base, and it was going to be cost prohibitive to rebuild it again. But by that time, we actually had some options of things we could purchase, and there was a big drive to go to the cloud. So we actually identified a product that would meet not only our scheduling needs, but actually has a ton of other capabilities that we might leverage in the future, called Starfish, that has become our enterprise scheduling tool for student to staff scheduling in the academic advising, career services, student services, and learning support spaces. It's not currently in the instructional space. That's would require a big scale up in our capacity to support it. Similarly, Handshake was implemented in 2018 to replace 8 separate instances of a single tool that we had on campus for career services management and activities. And so we now have a single instance of Handshake, serves the entire institution and all the career services units and centers that are out distributed across the schools, colleges, and divisions. And then most recently, happening right now, we're working on providing our first kind of dipping our toes into the waters of learning analytics and providing advisors and others with access, a little bit of insight into kind of the students' curricular space, which they have never had before. And the project is called LAVA, Learning Analytics Visualizations for Advisors. So this is solving another problem where we're trying to find ways to facilitate advisors and others being able to be proactive, to engage proactively with students before something becomes a problem. So to see trends in maybe attendance or performance or engagement in classes across multiple classes, to say, hey, something seems to be going on with the student. I'm going to reach out and have a conversation and see if we can kind of prevent bad things from happening rather than kind of catching them as they're falling, which is what we tend to do at a place of this large scale with so many students and, relatively speaking, so few advisors. So identifying issues, coming up with some solutions, finding ways to make these things happen, and then going all the way through implementation and assessment. So what I want to do is in the time we have remaining is kind of go through some of the lessons learned and things that I've really come away with, strategies for being able to effectively work, not only in distributed IT to make some of these kinds of things happen, but frankly, if you're into it, what you might do or what you might think about when you're working with or partnering with folks in distributed IT out in schools, colleges, and divisions, or when you're working with people in academic units or research units. You know, what are the approaches I can use to be an effective partner so that we can solve problems, right? So we can do good and help people do their work, do what it is they're here for, be that staff or be that students. So one of the key things is to, in my case, lead from the periphery. So I can't tell you how many times I've been asked, how long have you worked at Do It? And I have to respond, well, I don't work at Do It, but I do have the pleasure and honor of working with a lot of people in Do It all the time in order to be able to be effective at what I do. And leading means being that person who's going to have a vision. or develop strategies to achieve a vision. So recognizing that there's a large scale problem, and so very often at the university, I suspect you've experienced this, we look at a problem and we think about its complexity, and then you get the sinking feeling in your gut, and you're like, that can't be done. We can't do that at this institution. It's too big, too complex. We're never going to get everybody to agree. Just no way. And you throw up your hands and you kind of walk away. Leadership in this case is saying, well, what would it look like if we tried? You know, if we were to try, how could we go about doing it? And then figuring that out, and then talking to some other people and getting other people to say, you know, it's worth trying. It may not work, but we should give it a go. And we're going to run into roadblocks. We're going to have obstacles in our way. They're going to be naysayers, but we should really try, because this is a big problem. And if we can actually solve it, we could potentially improve the experience of every student who attends this institution. Or, and this is one of my favorite things to do, because it's really why I'm in OUA, I could improve the work experience of every academic advisor and career services professional at this institution. That's a powerful thing to think about, to make their lives easier and to make them more effective in the work they do supporting students. It's like, when you get to that point where it's like, no way, think about that and go, it's worth trying, right? Because you have that vision, you see what we could potentially do, and then you can work with others if you can't come up with it yourself, and sometimes you have to get the ideas of how we can actually accomplish this, work with others to develop strategies to actually make it happen. So what are some of the ways that I've managed to do this over the years? One of the things that I use as a model in my head for the kind of work that I do, and frankly, it's the kind of work that the Office of Undergraduate Advising does in our training, professional development, our communication, our all sorts of different kind of parts of our work. We engage problems, or we engage people, and we solve problems through community organizing. So remember, OUA was built to provide central coordination and support of a decentralized activity. That means we have very little, if no authority, but we do have, and have developed over the years, because I think we've been pretty effective, we've developed a lot of influence. So you can leverage that. Community organizing, if you Google community organizing at your leisure, principles of community organizing, you'll see some very, very excellent papers on the way in which one goes about community organizing, helping groups of people identify and solve problems for the common good. And there are very many strategies around how to go about doing that. Part of it involves making sure that everyone who needs to be at the table is at the table. So asking those questions around inclusion and diversity. Who are we missing? You know, here we have everyone we think we should have to solve this problem or discuss this issue. Who are we missing? And then you have that discussion. And then you get the other 10 people that you actually need in order to effectively address the needs of the community or the population that you're serving. The other thing about community organizing, it is very transparent about being aware that power comes into play in solving problems. Power can create a lot of problems, but it also is a way to go about solving it. So you have to identify, whatever the situation is we're trying to address, where does the power lie? Who has actual authority to make decisions around X, Y, or Z? And if they don't have authority, who has influence to be able to maybe affect those folks who actually do hold the authority and the power? And community organizing is extremely transparent about the fact that that's important to consider when you're trying to figure out how to solve problems. Here at the university, that can play out in whose buy-in do we need in order to be able to achieve this goal? Who do we need to get support in order to get funding in order to accomplish this project or task? So community organizing is a very good model, I think, for finding ways to be effective at this institution, which is wonderfully decentralized, of getting people to, I like this metaphor, it's kind of like identify that there's a rope on the ground and agree, look, there's a rope on the ground. Have everyone reach down and pick it up at the same time, and then find a way to get everyone to agree to pull on it in the same direction, right? That's community organizing. That's how you can get things done in a decentralized environment. Those of you who may have participated in the IT leadership program, ITLP, you're probably aware of the critical role that relationships play in the work of IT, be it central or decentralized, but frankly, in any work at this institution, because of our wonderful decentralization. Relationships are critical. And it's not who you know in terms of, oh, I can buddy. It's we need to know and understand each other and be able to trust each other to be able to work effectively to solve problems and to help reduce people's struggle. And if you're intentional about seeking out those relationships, building those relationships, fanning is a lovely term. So think of a fire that's burned down to embers, but if you kind of wave at it or blow on it, right, add some air, some oxygen, it bursts back into flames. That's fanning. Fanning relationships, maintaining them, helping them thrive. So seeking, building, and fanning relationships at this institution across our organizational boundaries is how I've been able to be, I think, effective in my work and in my role to accomplish some of the things you saw earlier. But I think it's ways in which all of us can become more effective is that if we intentionally seek out those relationships, talk to people, have friends introduce you to colleagues that they know that you don't know yet, who do things that might intersect with your work, whether you know it or not, might intersect someday. Get to know those folks so that they understand you, know you, and say, hey, I know this guy who does that kind of work. We should reach out to him. Number 5, I think, is incredibly important, and it's probably really, really hard, which is we have to build trust. Way back in the day when I started in university administration and the advising space, there was not a lot of trust between units and between divisions, between schools and colleges. It was actually really, really tough to try and get anything done because everybody questioned everybody else's motives. So intentionally working on building community in order to build trust and understanding is really, really important in our work. And that is true in technical work because as I'm not a developer. I kind of know how to code, for example, a website, but wouldn't want to do that because I'd build a very bad website. But there are professionals in Do It and also outside of Do It at this institution who they know that stuff. They are experts in it. I need to trust them. I need to say, this is what I need to have done. I need your opinion, what approach, what platform, and I need to trust them that they're professionals, they know what they're doing, and I'm going to accept that because you're a professional and you know what you're doing. Same thing the other direction. If I'm working with a business analyst from Do It or a project manager from the PMO office, and they're asking me questions about my needs, my pain points, right? Share my dirty laundry. This thing drives me crazy. I don't understand this. My community has found this to be a problem for years. I need to be able to say, very frankly, here's the situation, because I need to ensure that they understand it so that they can help us drive to solutions to those issues. So building trust, trusting others, and being trustworthy is super critical in that relationships component. And it's super critical to effective community organizing, right? To be able to affect change, positive change in large, complex organizations. And finally, partnering via collaboration. I can't do anything on my own in my work in OUA. I have to collaborate. I have to have partners, and not just partners who are coming to the table because we're providing funding, partners who want to come to the table to work with me and to work with my unit to be able to help people. They have to know that, hey, this group of folks is committed to what they're doing and they're really trying to help people. They know their jobs, they know their work. I want to work with them. And the same thing goes the other direction. You know, I mentioned right up front, yes, I work out in distributed IT, but I am completely dependent on the skills, knowledge, expertise, goodwill of my wonderful colleagues and Do It. I could not do what I do if I didn't have those relationships and if they weren't as good as they are at what they do. So collaboration is absolutely critical to being able to be effective here. If you're unable to collaborate or unwilling, all that does is create friction, right? All it does is just build inertia into the system of trying to get things done around here. A few things that I've learned over the years from really good project managers and BAs and folks like that is that your best friend is the idea of a minimum viable product. Iterative development, agile development, I love it. I'm a huge proponent of it. Not necessarily the really strict, Scrum schedule kind of thing, but the concept of iterative development is absolutely invaluable because when trying to solve a problem, everybody wants the 100% solution, and you're never going to get there. 100% solution never exists, can't exist. But you sure can get to 80%, where you're going to meet most of the needs, solve most of the problems, make most of the folks happy, and then you can work toward the edges over time to get to the 85% happiness and effectiveness, and 90%, 95%. But it's, like a limit in calculus. You'll never get to 100%. It's infinity. You can't get there. But just acknowledging that is really, really huge. In the 80% rule, I can't tell you how many conversations or committee meetings I've been in where the 80% rule, when you bring it up, gets people unstuck. It's like, can't we aim for just solving most of the problems most of the time for most people initially, our MVP, right? And even go lower sometimes for an MVP. I'm working on an MVP project right now where I'd be happy if it hit 50 or 60%, because it would be a major impact even if we only did that for a lot of people. So the idea of minimum viable products, iterative development, leveraging that 80% rule concept, that really helps people get unstuck, and it helps things get moving at this place. Before this, we tended to be very waterfall. It's like, we're going to develop it and work on it for 2 years and deliver it, and we hope you like it, because that's it. And we hope it works the way we thought it did and meet all the problems that you have. That's a way to get a lot of resistance, and it's also pretty inefficient, right? But MVPs, iterative development 80% rule, that's a way to get things started and for people to immediately feel the value and the impact of what it is you've delivered, and to be able to say, we want more, give us more. And that's what we did with the Advising Gateway. It was probably, when we delivered the MVP, a 60% solution, but that 60% was such a huge leap of a better experience over what the advisors were working with before that they were just clamoring for more. It's like, give us more, keep going, enhance it. And we've pushed on since then. It's probably up in the 80-90% area now. A user-centric approach. I'm sometimes the only one at some tables out, particularly in the academic space, where I'm pushing what are the needs of the user. Usually folks are really coming from their own points of view and their own units and their own needs. And it's like, can we take it back to the person who's actually got the problem? They're suffering from this ill. And can we think about what their needs are and how we can solve that in a way that's easy and intuitive and meaningful to them and impactful? So being user focused is really, really helpful, because I think it helps produce more effective solutions. And also the users, the people who you're actually trying to help, really, really appreciate it when that approach is taken, because the solutions that are delivered to them actually meet their needs, which is really cool. And then finally, I'm going to sing the praises of our wonderful user interface, user experience professionals here on campus and do it. I'm all about UI UX. I want to reduce clicks. I want to make things not require training. Solutions don't require the user to be trained very much unless you have compliance requirements and things like that. But the tool itself should be pretty intuitive, easy to use. And our wonderful UI UX folks are great at that. They're also great at helping you ideate. So some of you may know of the Course Search and Enroll application, which was rolled out a couple of years ago now, I think, mainly the product owners of the registrar's office. That product, which now was recently even enhanced more, is fantastic, but it arose from a design sprint that our UI UX team, at the time led by Phyllis Triag, a 1 week long design sprint that had, I think, 30 people in the room for a week. We design sprinted what was the pain point around enrollment for students at this university, and Course Search and Enroll app is the product. I can tell you that the product that just got updated a couple of weeks ago, I think, to be even better, it's the concept that came out of that week-long design sprint. Almost 1-to-1. It's incredible how that week-long design sprint done years ago now is the things students are using. The only way to enroll at this institution is using that. And it's so much better than the old way of doing things. So that's where our UI UX professionals can just be amazing, because they can help us ideate, help us focus our thinking, come up with concepts for solutions that then become real, like the course search and enroll app, which is super cool, and the advising gateway interface, among other things. So what else can we do, and what else have I done to be a good partner when I'm leading from over there or from over here where I am? I need to lean on your expertise. Those of you who are IT professionals and do it, or out in distributed IT land, you know your stuff. And I recognize that and I honor that. And when I reach out to you for help, I know I'm going to get quality insights, quality recommendations. As a leader, as someone who's trying to develop IT strategy to solve problems, it is critical that I reach out to you and gain your insights, because you know what you're doing. And I don't. I might conceptually understand the area of expertise that you have, but I can't do it. And I also don't know it in such a way where I can kind of make suggestions or think out the strategy for how we can get from point A to point B. So leaning on the expertise of our IT professionals, recognizing that expertise is just incredibly important. And frankly, I've been in context where that did not happen. And it's, I'm sure, incredibly demoralizing to folks to have your professionalism and your expertise not valued in a project or in an effort where people are trying to solve some problems. I've become a huge proponent of good business analysis, requirements gathering, and engaging stakeholders regularly and early in projects and in ideation. I think the more input we get from our stakeholders, the more effort we put into our business analyses and requirements gathering, the better the products are. So I always am thinking about ways in which we can engage business analysts to help us understand our problems and then work toward figuring out how we can go about solving them. And they tease it out of us. They ask us those questions, they probe. They ask questions, the same question in different ways, which makes us think differently about the problems that we're being confronted with. So good business analysis is awesome. And finally, project management. I love project managers. I'm a force person, not a leaf person. And project managers are incredible at managing process and keeping track of details. And I'm more effective as a product owner or as a project manager or project leader, or frankly, just a leader, when I have good project management working with me to accomplish the goals or to achieve strategy. Project management is great. I'm really glad that both business analysis and project management have been embraced much more over the last 5 to 10 years at the university than they used to be. And every time I have a project coming up, it's like, okay, we need a charter. I need a good project manager to help us develop a charter so that everything is really clear about what it is we're doing, why we're doing it, who needs to be involved, what their role is, all that good stuff that good project management helps us with. Number 13 is a very interesting one. I will say, this is my philosophy, but I say it a lot, and I say it a lot in staff meetings, for example, in OUA. They know this. You have to, as a good leader, whether you're in central IT or you're in distributed IT, you have to seek proper resourcing and support for any major endeavor you're thinking of undertaking. If you can't get that proper resourcing or support, and that proper resourcing could be money, proper resourcing could be personnel, FTE, could be temporary, could be permanent, because you're going to have ongoing support needs. If you can't get that, if you are unable to make the case to leadership or to central in order to support a large effort that's going to impact a lot of people, don't do it. Don't agree to it and pack it into the PDs of the staff who are already in your unit and say, oh, congratulations, you just got 10% more work to do. You're not getting any more compensation for it, but enjoy. I've seen that happen. It's a horrible thing. Make sure that your projects are properly resourced, your efforts are properly resourced and supported, and are in perpetuity, right? So some of the systems and tools that you've seen, sure, they may change, but conceptually, we're always going to need an advisor node system. We're going to need somebody to manage that and to be the administrator, the system administrator for our scheduling system. You can't say, oh, we're going to get 5 years of support and that's it, just for the development, the project. You got to think of ongoing, you have to think of technical debt. So, as a leader in whatever role, at whatever level, and whatever scale you're operating at, say no if you can't get that proper resourcing and support. And sometimes you have to say no to powerful people, but it's really important that you do, because what you're doing is saving yourself and you're saving your colleagues who would be getting that additional burden, a lot of pain in the future. And finally, almost finally, find champions, strategic partners, stakeholders who are really excited about your idea. Engage them and have them go around with you to help sell this idea, sell the project, sell the partnership, because they're the ones who are actually going to be utilizing it. They're the ones who are excited about it. They recognize the value. It's like, boy, if we can do this, it's going to make my life so much easier. I'm going to be so much more effective in my work with students. Those are the folks who can make your case often better than you can. I mean, I can talk till I'm blue in the face in the community about the value of this particular project, but if I get some champions from the instructional space and some advisors and some career services folks and some other stakeholders to say, we need this, here's why, this is what it would do, and to share their stories, that makes the case for you. And then those resources and support can flow sometimes. Sometimes it takes that. The champions, the strategic partner, the engaged stakeholder, to get things unstuck so that the resources and support can actually flow. And finally, this one, while it seems kind of small or modest, I have found in my own work history to be just critical. Just thank people, okay? Acknowledge the contributions that they're making. Thank them for it. Thank them for their expertise and their skill and their dedication, and sometimes their extra work. A lot of people go above and beyond if they're really into a project, and acknowledging that is a leaderly thing to do, no matter whether you're a titular leader or you're just working in a unit and you're doing your thing. If somebody helps you out, or if you're collaborating with someone and the 2 of you or 5 of you end up being able to achieve your goal, thank the folks that you worked with. Express that appreciation. We all know that when you do something well, oftentimes you don't hear anything. You don't get a thank you by email, or you don't get a way to go. You do hear complaints, right? You roll something out and people are like, this doesn't meet my need. Every once in a while, when it happens, somebody reaches out and says, hey, you really transformed my experience, or you really helped me. And that goes 1,000 miles. And think about if we all did that regularly, even for the little things. It would make our experience of working here a lot better. It would make student experience of being a student here a lot better if we all acknowledged, frankly, how much we're helping each other out. So this is the full list of some of my learnings from over the years of how can one be effective in this very decentralized place. And perhaps like me, working from the periphery, working from distributed IT, how can we be effective partnering with each other, working together to do big things, do the thing that people say, it's impossible here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison to do that, but to actually do it. And I've participated in a couple of those where 10 years ago, people were saying, nope, won't happen. And 10 years later, we're sitting there with the thing and it's happened. It can happen. And these are some of the ways in which I've found in my own personal experience that can work. They don't always work, but they usually work. That is my story. Oh my goodness, my slides have not been forwarding. I've been talking and talking. There we go. That is my story. I've been looking at the one screen and I didn't realize it stopped about midway through. My apologies, folks. I will go back, actually. Let me, for the video, I'm going to go back to where I think it stopped. And go slowly through this. Just really quickly, I'm going to go through this so people can see the things that I've been talking about. This happened to me once before on a Zoom presentation where I thought my slides were perking along and they were not. That's the whole list. So if you want to see the whole thing all at once, that's the whole list. And finally, one of my astrophotos. I'm an astrophotographer. It's a hobby. By way of thanks to all of you. So remember, thank people. And then I would absolutely welcome any questions or comments or curiosities that you have, or things that I didn't do, but some tips or tricks or good ideas that you have about being effective from your positions.
So I've been looking through the chats, and there's a lot of chatter here about people who look at the barriers to getting people to work together. And so one of, the person said there's barriers where people have different incentives or different approaches in mind. What are some of the things that you can talk about that might help bring people together so that they are sort of working on the same track?
Yeah, I think that gets around the community organizing bit, which is we have to find the place, the intersection where our common interests lie. And my experience in the IT and academic space here at the university, that intersection where our common interests lie often is in helping students or helping each other, helping faculty and staff do what we need to do. So what you have to do is find out what that common interest is for the folks who might be kind of pushing back and saying, no, I'm not sure I want to participate in that. They have to understand what the value add is to them, right? Where's our common interest that they're actually going to gain, their students, their staff are going to gain by participating in this effort. And what the only way that can usually occur is through conversation, is through engaging with the person or the people in real meaningful conversations. And frankly, they have to be pretty frank conversations. Sometimes, it's hard, but sometimes you have to be the person that kind of acknowledges the elephant that's sitting in the room. It's like, I think this seems to be the thing that's got us stuck. Is this true? Do you feel stuck around this? And see where that conversation goes. There's a wonderful, wonderful person here at the university, Seema Kapani, who is a master at this, which is it's posing the question. So instead of making a statement in a situation saying, this sucks, this is a problem, why are you being so obstinate? It's posing a question that elicits from the folks who might be kind of pushing back a little bit. It starts them thinking about their own, why are they resisting? Because they may not even know, it may just be a habit. I found that out to be, particularly in the early days before OUA, that there were just habits of responding to things coming from central or from the registrar's office or from other places where we had a reflexive reaction, which was no. So you have to help folks get beyond that. And the only way to do it is through conversation. And the best way to do it is through questions that kind of help tease out where that intersection of your common interests are and where that value add is going to be for the person that you're trying to work with and want to collaborate with, but they're kind of resisting. So those are a few thoughts on that.
I think as a follow-up question to that, someone did ask if you use surveys to find out what the barriers might be. And then I would like to expand that to the question I had, which is when you need to, how do you figure out when to say yes or no? Do you have a approach or a template that you use for that? And would surveys be part of that? One of the tools that you might use?
I don't use surveys really for that part. I use surveys more, I have used surveys historically more to understand what the pain points are for a community or a population I'm serving or working with. So in order to like extend reach, to really try and get out and understand, okay, for example, of academic advising, my own personal experience of that has limits, right? And there are people who do other forms of academic advising where I don't understand what their pain points are. They overlap with mine. So if I don't ask them, what's hard for you? What's driving you crazy? I'm not going to know, which means the solutions that I try and provide to solve problems are going to not include their voice, right? And that gets to the community organizing piece, which is who are we missing, right? And surveys are a way to be more inclusive, but they're tricky. We all know really some of the challenges around surveys, and they can be helpful, but they can also kind of introduce some bias. They're very tricky, but they can be very helpful. And I find them helpful in that requirements gathering stage, really understanding what the needs are and making sure that I'm trying to understand the full curve of those needs within the community I'm serving as best as I can, pushing out to the edges. If I just rely on my own experience and understanding, I'm only going to get this narrow slice. I'm really not going to go further. And you can't talk to everybody, right? If you're serving thousands of people, surveys can extend that understanding a little bit. And then how do you know when to say yes or no? Does that relate kind of to the point of the resource bit and the support bit? Yeah, okay. For me, it's fairly clear cut, which is, and there's risk involved, right, in saying no. And there's always risk involved in saying no to power. And that power could be your boss, that power could be a vice provost, that power could be a provost, that, it can be can come in many different ways. But I've learned, for the most part, I haven't had to say no very often, because I guess I've found ways to do these things to make a compelling enough case where the answer more often than not is yes. So one way to not have to say no is to find ways to get to yes that are effective. And some of these things I shared with you, I hope, are some things that you can think about as a way to getting to yes. But I have occasionally had to say no. It hasn't been a permanent no. It was a no in the moment, which was, if you're not going to properly resource this, this needs another FTE in order to properly support it. The other thing I do is, I don't want to just do something. I want to do it well, okay? I don't want my product to just be okay. I want it to be good, very good. So that's an argument that I use sometimes to say, if you can't get me this FTE, we're not going to be able to maintain or support properly a product really well in the way in which we like to do things, which is striving for excellence, okay? So sometimes that initial no is not a forever no. It's like, no, we're not willing to do that. And then the person who has the authority and the power or the purse strings chews on that for a little while. Then we have another conversation, and maybe we take a step toward yes, because they're like, you're right. We don't just want to deliver something that's going to be kind of meh, and then we're going to have to 5 years from now throw a bunch of more money at it because it was just meh now. Let's do it right. And that's the argument. Let's do it right the first time, if we can, as best as we can understand what right looks like at this time, and go for that. And usually that gets things to yes. And again, you're not working to achieve some, create a fiefdom or develop something that's, a statue or something. You're doing something that's intended to help people. So they're very compelling arguments when you're saying that if we do this right and we do it well and we properly support it, this is going to help tens of thousands of people every year for tens of years. Why wouldn't you want to say yes, right? And sometimes there are constraints. It's like budget constraints, resources, whatever. And that's a reality that often comes into play. So they're not saying no on principle to you. They're saying no because they have constraints that they can't get around. And that's where I have to acknowledge that fact. But maybe we both walk away from the table and say, it's no at the moment, but let's come back in a year. And maybe we can make it happen because we'll have worked to try and free up the budget resources to make it happen. So those are a few of the ways that I kind of think about that particular moment, I guess.
Well, just as a heads up, I'm giving you your 5-minute warning.
5 minutes, okay.
Yes, 5 minutes. So we only have an opportunity for a couple of more questions. I'm not seeing a whole lot more questions in the chat.
Okay.
But one of the issues that I had was wondering about is,
Mhm.
are there arguments or things that you think have been the most effective? I think you've already answered this a little bit
Mhm.
from upper levels of management when you are trying to get a project off the ground. What are, I think you already talked about it. I
Mm,
think the student emphasis
definitely.
and how
Mhm.
much you can help other students. So that was a
Yeah.
question I had, but I think you've already
Uh-huh.
answered it.
Let me add one thing to that, though. There's a wrinkle, and it really plays into my own work, like my day job, is that sometimes the impact on students is indirect. So my work is actually to provide support, improve the experience, IT resources, access to information of staff so that they can be more effective in their work with students. So that's a compelling argument. So my job really is to improve the work experience, work life of advisors and career services professionals. But by doing that, my work is affecting every single student at this institution, right? So remember that some of your impact in whatever it is you're doing might be indirect, but it might be really big, even though indirect. So kind of think about that next step out, or two steps or three steps. Some of you are doing work that has ripple effects that goes frankly beyond our institution, right? So kind of think about that. And again, that can be used to make a very compelling case for why you might want to do something.
And it looks like we have one final question that should
Okay.
be our closing question, which is,
Mhm.
should we be thinking of do it not as central, but as a cross organizational unit?
I think that would be lovely. It's one of the interesting things about UW-Madison and my experience here is that culture change is slow, but it can change. And we are still in but a global pandemic, right? And think of all the changes that we've made, and we made them in a hurry. And it was a whole bunch of things that probably if you had asked 2 years ago, we'd say, nope, will never happen here, right? So I would just hold on to that, that if the Division of Information Technology, which is not an entity, right? It's made of people. If the people within the Division of Information Technology want to change the relationship to the institution and the people who make up that institution, you can. You just have to decide you want to do it.
All right. Well, I think we're pretty much running out of time.
Great.
So thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much.
Thank you everyone for attending.
Thanks, everybody.
We can basically conclude the session, but I
Mhm.
wanted to let people know that the next session is what is networking and how can I get better at it with Craig Cook at 3:15. And I hope everyone enjoyed the session. I certainly enjoyed hearing about all your learnings at the UW. So
Thank
thank you
you.
very much.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.